Ultimates are by far the most broken thing in the game. It's been the same situation since the release of Overwatch. If you have more ultimates, you win the fight by default, but wasting your ultimate or getting it kited are common problems. So let's get into the best way to use every DPS ultimate. If you want to grind the meta or rank up on your favorite heroes, use the link in the description to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of courses and guides to help you improve faster and easier. Check it out and enjoy the video. Bob has recently gotten more survivable and more consistent, but just throwing him down main at the start of the fight is an easy way to lose out on a lot of his pressure. If you want to start the fight with Bob, it's best to use him from the flank. He'll have a more effective position, and with the Bob in the enemy team, there's no way for them to turn on you. Bob will prefer to shoot targets damaged by your rifle, so when you're also on the flank, it's a lot easier to secure kills. Bob also works perfectly to counter other ultimates. Make sure to consider the specific ultimate that's being used, but overall, most aggressive pushing ultimates like Annihilation or Duplicate can be stopped by a counter Bob. Next up is Bastion. His ultimate is definitely on the weaker side, so he's pretty limited in how you use it, but one of the best ways to use it is right after your first form. After your turret form ends and the enemy team is getting ready to punish your downtime, you can start up your artillery strike to blow them up as they walk. At the very least, it'll force a ton of abilities, and buy you time for your next form to come back online. Even if you're immobile in your ultimate, you still have the Ironclad passive, so players that make it to your position won't kill you easily. On to Cassidy. His ultimate is one of the hardest to use in uncoordinated play, but it is a really good counter to support ultimates. They're normally some of the hardest to deal with, but Deadeye slows the tempo down entirely. Sound Barrier, Kitsune Rush, even Orbital Ray just can't keep going under the threat of one-shot. The damage ramps up really high, so as long as your team can keep you alive, you can negate a better ultimate easily. Deadeye itself is easy to play around, so it's better when the enemy team has already committed to the fight so you can counter. Moving on to Echo. There are so many ways to use the ultimate, and it obviously depends on the enemy heroes. To make it simple, you pretty much always want to go for DPS or supports. The only tank worth copying is Ramatra. His Nemesis form keeps you alive much better than any other tank's abilities. For the other two roles, you want either an extra life or instant burst value. That makes Venture, Tracer, Sombra, and Ana some of the best picks. 2 aggressive cycles with Recall or Burrow or Translocator, or 1 high impact hit with Biotic Nade. Look to find similar ways to use your copy even if the enemy heroes aren't good picks to choose from. On to Genji. Dragon Blade has gotten better for sure. The faster fire rate makes those first 2 slashes come out real quick, but you definitely need support from your team. If you can't get a shout or overdrive or bubble, it's best to use in the middle of the fight, when abilities have been expended and you can quickly get a kill and then look for another during your deflect. Everyone always focuses Dragon Blade, so if you really want to use it first, you have to expect the counter ultimate, and as long as you don't die, it's usually a good trade. It's really boring, but a mid-level ultimate for a support ultimate is always a positive outcome. Now for Hanzo. Dragon Strike is a pretty lackluster ultimate. The slightly increased movement speed doesn't make it any better for getting picks on backline, or even consistently forcing tank abilities, but just like Bob, it's a good counter to an aggressive push, especially when it's through a choke. Positioning the path might take a bit of work, but your Sonic Arrow will tell you what type of rotation the enemies are making. So as long as you're ready as soon as they commit, your Dragon Strike will deal way more damage than usual, killing everyone at best or massively slowing down the enemy push at worst. Next up is Junkrat. He actually has one of the best ultimates for pushing with. Riptire basically forces the enemy team to kite or stay alert ready to shoot the tire. That makes it perfect for your team to take space. Either you get control over the objective or you completely wipe the enemy team. They can't stop both your front line and the tire at the same time, even if you're absent from the fight for a few seconds. It's definitely a mid-level ultimate overall, but compared to the rest of the DPS ultimates, it's way better at opening up the fight. The threat of the one-shot is just that effective. Moving on to Mei. Blizzard is pretty interesting. Sometimes it's the easiest ultimate to deal with, using abilities like Cleanse or Life Grip, but when you can lock enemies in with your wall, it's a team wipe setup. Starting the fight with Blizzard can work, but it's best used with your second Ice Wall. You can force a lot of defensive cooldowns with just your damage and Ice Wall, and because the cooldown is 12 seconds, you'll be able to use it again with your Blizzard before most other abilities come back online. Tank abilities like Ram Shield or Queen Shout won't be ready for your second wall, and neither will the longer cooldowns like Suzu or Immortality Field. All you have to do is survive before using your second wall, saving Ice Block as long as possible so you can still be aggressive when the enemy abilities are gone. Next up is Pharah. With Barrage, you can pretty much always start the fight. On attack, you can set up to jet dash over the backline and one-shot them, or instantly blow up a tank. While on defense, you can hit the enemy team in their rotation before they can even set up to go first themselves. Because it charges so quick, using it first every time is always really good, but you can also recognize when it's a perfect counter to an enemy ultimate. Slow ultimates like Amplification Matrix and Deadeye get immediately shut down by a well-placed Barrage. Now for Reaper. He's similar to Mei. Although Death Blossom is less counterable with its immediate burst damage, there are also more ways to block the damage overall, so you'll still want to use your first teleport and Wraith Engage to force backline abilities, and then go in again with your Blossom. Just like Dragon Blade, it works better in the mid-fight, and just like Bob, it works better as a counter. Trying to push into the enemy team just won't work when a Death Blossom is ready to split you in half. On to Sojourn and our Overclock. It's weaker than before, and doesn't have that instant 2-tap threat anymore, but it's definitely a fight starter. The amount of damage you can put out makes it worth opening with, as long as you avoid shooting the tank. The railgun shot burst is more effective when it's putting backline heroes at half health. Use that piercing damage to focus the same hero and you'll be starting the fight with a strong advantage. It's not as good to counter with mid-fight since you risk being pushed, but as long as you hold on to your slide, you can easily match the enemy team's tempo and keep their health low. In contrast, Soldier 76's visor is a lot harder to use overall. You can't expect much more from starting it, and there's not much it does against the other stronger ultimates in the game, but it can counter a lot of specific ultimates, like Dragon Blade or Captive Sun, specifically situations where a single player is exposing themselves to be aggressive. It's not even guaranteed to be effective, but it's the best way to use it in the ultimate fights. Otherwise, it's good for quickly ramping up pressure on the backline when you're on the flank. A visor from behind forcing the enemy team into your front line is pretty much what you're looking for. And now for Sombra. EMP is incredibly flexible. It's an amazing opener that can instantly set up kills. It's the best way to start a fight with a DPS ultimate for an immediate advantage. And because of the mega wide team silence, it works perfectly to counter too. It'll depend on the enemy ultimates, but the vast majority of them get immediately shut down, with a big chance of just killing everyone outright. Sombra may not be very consistent, but her ultimate is almost guaranteed to get value. As long as you don't hold it for too long and find a way to win or turn the fight as soon as possible, you can carry the entire game regularly. Next we have Symmetra, who has the second best way to start a fight with a DPS ultimate. Photon Barrier doesn't instantly set up kills on the enemy team, but it gives you a massive advantage from the very start. If the enemy team doesn't fall back instantly or counter with an EMP, it's pretty much impossible to beat, and any ultimate you use on top of it gets even more value with a friendly shield splitting the whole map. It's so strong that you can always flip the objective in your favor, even if you start it from a distance. Just make sure that you align it to take the best possible space for your team. It won't help much if it doesn't give you an advantage on the objective. Closing in on the final four, first we have Torbjorn. Molten Core is pretty much the best point zoning ultimate in the game. The armor melting damage it deals keeps it consistent even when tanks are getting significantly stronger. It's good, but it's also obviously limited to objective plays. When you can't force the enemy team to be on the point, there's not much you can do, so saving it for checkpoints or final fights is best, or when the point is small on maps like Busan Sanctuary and Samoa Volcano, so you can flip it easily. You can also use it for countering, but only against ultimates that have a slow start. Molten Core takes a bit of time to set up itself, so although it'll slow enemies from overwhelming you with ultimates, it can't do it immediately. On to Tracer. Pulse Bomb is a classic. Ideally, you want to get picks on squishies, but when that's not possible, you can always go for the tank. But just keep in mind that you can't get kills on tanks by just sticking them and focusing them down. It has to be the other way around. It's perfect for punishing after defensive abilities end, like Nemesis Form or Fortify, so you'll have to force them first before trying to burst them down. Otherwise, there's nothing too complicated about it. You go for the insta-kills when the backline isn't aware, or stick the tank after they've pushed too aggressively. Next we have Venture, and Tectonic Shock definitely isn't that easy to just whip out. A lot of heroes can avoid it with vertical mobility during the wind-up time, so once again we have an ultimate that's best used mid-fight. After abilities are forced and shields are broken, the shockwave damage is more likely to stick. If you push into a team that's ready with all their abilities, you won't find much. It's way more effective when you pop out somewhere random in the mid-fight and start blasting an entire street full of players. And now for our final ultimate, Widowmaker's Infrasight. It pretty obviously has no impact when the fight has already started, but you don't want to use it too early to the point where the enemies can just wait it out. On attack, it can always net you more space when you have the whole enemy team's info, but on defense, you're more likely to be ignored and avoided for 15 seconds. Simply put, you want to use it when the enemy has committed far enough that they can't quickly fall back, but not fully started ulting and pushing hard yet. And in the Widowmaker mirror, the second Infrasight will pretty much always win. And if you're forced to use it offensively, make sure your team is ready to capitalize on the information fast before the enemy wall hacks pop up as well. That's it for the best way to use every DPS ultimate. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.